Okay, it's now 2 minutes after 3 o'clock here in Israel, Tel Aviv time. Hi everyone, my name is Ami and I'm very happy to be here today with you and with my colleagues for this webinar that we have prepared for you with the title Modernizing the Future of Financial Services. I'm here at the Aerospike Israel office in Tel Aviv. Together with me is my colleague Stuart, and we are the main hosts for our webinar today. Stuart Tarmy is joining from New York, the States. He's our Global Director for Financial Services Industry Solution, working for Aerospike headquarters in the United States. And alongside with me, we also have two of my colleagues here, part of the Aerospike Israeli team, Oshrat, who is our Senior Director, Account Executive and Account Manager, and as well as Zohar, who is our Solution Architect, Senior Solution Architect. Again, both are part of the team here in Tel Aviv, working at the Aerospike Israel. So we are happy to have you here. We are also recording this webinar, and then later on we're going to publish it, of course, on a couple of different channels that we have, our YouTube channel, on our Meetup page, and other places as well. So you can always come back and listen to the recording later on, and of course always ping us on the various channels that we have. In terms of the agenda, in a minute I'm going to finish with my welcome and housekeeping, and then I will let Stuart take the lead, and Stuart will walk us through his presentation on modernizing the future of financial services. Right after Stuart, I will take over for a couple of minutes, give you a glimpse into what is Aerospike Real-time Data Platform, talk very briefly on the architecture and the characteristics and a few common use cases and some examples of customers we have here, specifically in our region in Israel. A very short, high-level overview of approximately 10 minutes. And then if we have any kind of questions, we can do a live Q&A. This is all live. Stuart is live, breathing, sitting at home in New York, and we are doing this live. So feel free also to write us down and use any channel you have, whether it's from the Meetup page or LinkedIn or whatever, or here on Zoom, of course, and send us your questions, and we can do that live Q&A at the end. At this point, I will stop my sharing. It's exactly 5 minutes after the hour. We are on time, and I will let Stuart to take over, share his screen, and start his presentation. Please, Stuart, thank you very much for doing this for us and joining us this morning. And please go ahead, take the lead.
Okay, thank you. Let's make my screen larger.
Just go to, yeah, exactly. Thank you very much.
Okay, terrific. All right, I'm Ami. Thank you for the introduction. Really pleased to be here. Just a little bit about myself. As Ami mentioned, I'm in the New York area. I've been involved with financial service, banking, fraud, payments for 25 plus years. Former lives, I was with Fiserv, MasterCard, Bank of Trust, and McKinsey & Company, and started my background off very technical, so I can get fairly deep. The most important thing in the slide actually is my email address in the bottom, if you want to get in touch later on after the presentation or as we go forward with Ami and the others. Real quick about Aerospike. We were founded in 2009. We're based in Palo Alto in Silicon Valley. But I just want to point out a few of our clients in financial services is the reason for the slide. So we have a very deep footprint in financial services. We work across many industries because we are an extraordinarily fast real-time data platform. But within financial services, you can see companies here in payments, companies like PayPal. Venmo is part of PayPal. We power the European Union's instant payment system, part of Amex, part of Visa. We power almost all of Charles Schwab. I'll go into some of these things here, but we're very prominent in these areas. Not just these areas in financial services. I'll point out a few others I like to. Sony PlayStation, if you know them, they have over 100 million users. We power their authentication. People sign on. That's Aerospike enabling it. And just one other I'd like to point out is Wayfair. So a big part of modernization and payments and things is being able to do customer 360 personalization. So we power firms like Wayfair and others here. Just in terms of who Aerospike is, where we play against competitors, we're known as by many as the fastest, most scalable database out there. If you want to run extraordinarily fast, large amounts of data into the multiple terabytes, petabytes, we're the preferred solution. And this just shows you where we play a little bit against Oracle, Redis, Couchbase, other ones. We're in the far up right corner. We do a lot of takeaways from these firms that once they hit a certain amount of data, they get are not really performant or cost effective. And this part on the right hand side just shows that as your data grows, we will scale literally with you. The other firms cost scale exponentially and can get cost prohibitive. This is a slide that we're always required if you're in the data union to show, but the key thing here is that market leaders, CEOs, CXOs want more data. No surprise there. This one gets a little more interesting still. Everybody knows this, that data is growing increasingly fast. More and more data is being developed and consumed. A takeaway here, though, is the part of the data that is real time. And what you'll see here is that the real time usage of data is growing faster than the market as a whole. So if I drill down deeper into financial services, which is where it really gets more interesting, is in financial services, McKinsey and Company has done some studies on global banks. And what they found, and it probably isn't surprising, but it's interesting to see the actual numbers, is that the banks and financial service firms that do technology, invest in technology, advance things the most are winning by far. So this is a slide that shows return on equity of the top 10% banks, and it compares it to the bottom 10%, and then you can see the middle. The most technically proficient, I'll word it that way, banks, financial institutions are killing it and just gaining dramatic market share. And you can do a similar slide on price to book value. So the takeaway here is the winners are winning, and it's all because of digitalization, the use of AI analytics that the more advanced firms are bringing to this, and this is enabling them for operational excellence. So probably no surprise, but I was surprised at how much the winners are taking market share. It's really dramatic. Last slide here, you might ask is, okay, if the financial service firms are investing in advanced analytics, AI type things, where are they putting the spend? Where are they investing? So McKinsey's estimated that there's about $1 trillion in value to be realized. That's on revenue for firms that really invest. And where they're putting it is into marketing and sales and risk compliance systems. That's the bulk of the money for the wins. Okay. Let me go through what we're seeing that the best firms are doing, where Aerospike is helping them. And there's a number of use cases. I'm going to throw these up here, and we'll talk through some. And as I go through the presentation, I'll go into more detail. The first one on the left is called, we call intraday system of record or operational trade store. We can actually act as that real-time system of record for companies, and we do this for firms like Schwab and others. It's an incredible thing. One of the really interesting use cases here is if you're a firm, and you may not be, but if you're a firm that has some legacy batch mainframe type systems and you want to convert it to a real-time system, Aerospike can do that. And the way that works is you have the mainframe system, batch system. You can put Aerospike in front of it. Beginning of the day, you can upload the data to Aerospike. Aerospike can then act as a real-time data layer. End of the day, you can push it back into your mainframe to act as the system of record. It's a very cost-efficient way, low-risk way to compete against the more advanced firms. We help with algorithmic trading. We can be a trade repository. We have a number of clients there, including Fidelity, risk modeling and analysis and compliance. Again, many financial service firms, leaders in the area here. And just to name some, we work with the largest hedge fund analytics firm in Europe. We work with the large asset managers like the Fidelities and Schwabs. We work with large analytics firms in the United States, so very, very prominent there. If I go to the bottom left-hand side, we'll see identity management and fraud. I talked about, we do PayPal, the European Union's instant payment system, et cetera. Customer 360 personalization, very strong, very important. You saw in the last slide, it's one of the key areas people are investing. And then lastly, digital wallets, where we're under an account, you may have, thousands, tens of thousands, maybe whatever sub-accounts that you need to keep digital wallets. We're a very effective solution there, and something we do quite a bit as an example for the European Union. So here is a slide in financial services of where we play: instant payment, fraud, banking, capital markets. I'm going to talk now about AI and analytics. I'm going to use fraud as an example because it's a good one to illustrate a lot of the concepts. So a couple of things just to baseline it. Fraud is increasing dramatically. It's tripled in the last number of years. It's going to keep increasing. Probably no surprise there. But where it gets interesting is, well, let me share things. So there's a lot of cost to your business for fraud. So we know there's losses, chargebacks, the associations like MasterCard, Visa can raise your interchange fees. That's the 2 to 3% you pay if there's too much fraud. Investigation costs, reconciliation costs, false positives, false negatives. For all these reasons, you want to be fighting fraud. But when I talk to companies, I tell them there's a much more important or bigger opportunity. And that's in using your fraud and risk metrics at the customer level to better personalize your interactions with customers. So if I know somebody, for instance, is a good risk, I'll give them better offers. It's somebody I really want as a client. Likewise, if they're a poor risk, I want to pull back, or I may make it more expensive for them to want to do business with them. And so this is where the really, really good firms are differentiating themselves and dramatically taking market share. So when you think about fraud, when you think about risk profiles, think about saving money like you should from losses, but using that data in much more innovative ways. It's a big trend. I'd say, I'm going to make this up, or a rough note, I guess, about 30% of the firms I see do this reasonably well. So types of fraud. There's two types. One is, the first is are you who you say you are? And there's identity fraud. There's something called synthetic identity, where people are making up fake personas. They're actually opening up fake bank accounts, creating fake government ID numbers, and pretending to be somebody else. There's something called deep fakes, where people are actually taking their pictures and photoshopping it in a very realistic way that you can't really tell it's fake, onto passports and driver's licenses, and using that for identification. And there's a lot of work, advanced work into identity management for this. The second type of fraud is, even if you are who you say you are, you can still do bad things to me. You can steal, there's theft, you can default on me, you can declare bankruptcy. These are things that kill the payment companies. When I was with MasterCard, they were very focused on these sort of things too. Bankruptcy was a really bad one. I'll give you an example. One of the things we found at MasterCard is we saw that if somebody was doing things they hadn't done in the past that looked out of character and were expensive, it might mean they were going to declare bankruptcy. Examples would be that they start to take expensive vacations, or they start buying expensive cars. And we found, bankruptcy was a thing there. We also found, interesting enough, that if people were doing this sort of thing, it meant they might often were getting divorced and also might declare bankruptcy because of that. They wanted to stick to their spouse. They do funny things. So the best identity management firms or fraud systems are looking at identity management and trying to predict, bad behavior, and then working with that accordingly. So I talked to you before about fraud increasing dramatically, but what's interesting is the technology has been getting better. You might say to yourself, why is fraud increasing when the systems are getting better? A couple of things are happening. So you probably see you can see on the left-hand side of the slide that credit cards, used to have magnetic stripes to contain your account information. And the credit card associations have moved people to the EMV chip, the chip there. EMV, for people who don't know, just stands for Europay, MasterCard, Visa. Europay used to be the European subsidiary of MasterCard, but it was purchased some time ago and no longer exists. They still call it EMV. And the EMV chip made it almost impossible to commit fraud if the chip was used, card present, was used in a card present transaction. There's all sorts of physical security and network security on the chip encryption that makes it very difficult. And in fact, when MasterCard launched the card, first year they found there was a 54% decrease in fraud, which was tremendous. So what's happening if fraud's increasing, but card present fraud, which used to be half of the fraud out there, is declining dramatically? Well, the answer is sort of obvious. The fraudsters caught on, it moved to easier channels, right? You're not going to keep trying to steal from the house that has the great alarm systems. And they moved to card not present, which is primarily phone and internet transactions. And they moved to identity theft to steal people's things. So all that's happened is it's migrated. Fraud has not gone away and has gotten more and more sophisticated. So what do you want to be looking at? What are the best firms doing in terms of building AI systems and fraud systems, using AI for fraud systems? And this is going to be the same stuff for personalization, customer 360, the same idea. So there's three things that are required to create a really good AI system. So on the left-hand side, you obviously want to be able to create, the best algorithms you can. I've written here about a dozen popular ones. In reality, there's 120. I think DataRobot has pre-programmed something like 150. I mean, there's just so many you can do. They're often used in nested type algorithms. You often don't use just one. And you can do things all the way down to sophisticated neural nets and deep learning. The second thing you want is large volumes of data. Everybody always says the more data, the better. That's not always true. There's a lot of data that's cross-correlated. But in general, the more data you can use and analyze, the better off you are. And you want to be able to process it in real time, and typically in milliseconds. And the reason for that, for real-time stuff, is what you're really trying to do is run the most sophisticated algorithms with as much, applicable data as you can, and do it really fast so you can give a good customer experience. And that's why you're trying to jam as much as you can into a small window for that good customer experience. So where Aerospike plays as a real-time data platform is obviously in the large volumes of data and being able to process it really, really quickly. What I'd share with you is you can't do the best AI algorithms, including neural nets and deep learning, unless you can do the volumes of data in real-time processing. It's an absolute necessary requirement. And so we are without a doubt, an enabler of it. And I'll talk about in the next slide, actually, some statistics that PayPal uses, which I consider the market leader versus other ones. Okay, so evolution of fraud systems. What are people doing with AI and advanced analytics? So let me just pull this up. That's as far as I want to go, I think. All right, I'll add some things animated here. So the history of AI and with fraud, but AI in general, is people started with rule-based systems. I think people know that they've been around 30 plus years. The market leader for fraud systems is Actimize, that came out of Israel. It was a rule-based engine. The most sophisticated rule-based engines I've seen for this sort of stuff have about 10,000 rules. That's the number I want you to keep in mind, 10,000. And you can imagine you have a system over 30 years. Every year you add 100, 150 rules. It just grows into a sprawling mess. The problem with rule-based systems is first, I should say they worked well. They were a huge advance for the industry. But the problem today is they're always a day late, right? They're always a day late from the fraudster who finds a hole, finds a hack. By the time it's discovered, patched, rolled out, it's a lot of time has passed and it's not the best way. So people have obviously moved on to AI ML-based systems. I will share that rule-based systems are still well over half the market. And firms like Actimize that were totally rule-based, are trying to port it to add AI type elements to it. The best of breed AI ML-based systems, first they're self-learning. They can be trained, to be more effective. The best ones use between 100 and 300 data attributes. So they're processing 100 to 300 things, and it's things like, you know, who the merchant is, who are you, what are your spends over the last month, right? Is it coming from a mobile device or a PC or card present? But it's 100 to 300 attributes. That's the number. And with these systems, fraud globally is about 1.2%. It differs by country. It differs by channel. For instance, travel has more fraud than, you know, hardware. Travel is one that's typically has a lot of fraud, but about 1.2% globally on average. The best firms have moved to neural nets, and neural nets. The company that does this the best is I believe PayPal. Here they're looking at just enormous amounts of data in the deep learning mode. The number I want you to think of here is PayPal will actually analyze up to in the millions of data attributes, and sometimes up to 10 million of data attributes to see if you're a fraudster, and do that in about 20 milliseconds, just enormously fast. And PayPal has had enormous success with this. When I told you that globally fraud's about 1.2%, PayPal's brought their fraud down to 0.3%. And that's on roughly $1 trillion in spend. So just an enormous win. I'll talk about some of the things a little more on them later on. The last part of the evolution here, and this is becoming very prominent, I'll share some information, is explainable AI. And what's happening here is the auditors and the regulators and the business units want to understand what's going on inside the models. They want to make sure there's no discrimination. They want to make sure there's no bias against people. They want to make sure they're not going to blow up, right? We've seen too many blow-ups, right? Even recently in the crypto market with these models. So the regulators are coming down. So all explainable AI is a AI model to understand what's going on in the AI and neural net models. Because all you know is with the AI and neural nets is, you know, the inputs, you know, the outputs, you don't know what's going on in between. And they're demanding it get explained. So let me give you a little more detail on that. A lot of regulations are coming out, including in Israel. So let me share that. So first one, in the European Union, they have proposed something called the European Union AI Act. It requires transparency of AI models. It requires you be able to explain what's going on. And it has heavy fines. It's modeled after the GDPR, the data privacy. Data privacy GDPR has a 4% penalty. The European Union is going to have a 6% fine of the total global revenues for people who show they discriminate using AI. The UK is in the process of building their models. It's going to be modeled after the EU's, and it's going to be, they think, a little bit more onerous. In the United States, there's work going on with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. 17 states and the District of Columbia have introduced bills or laws already, and they have fines. The fines can be up to $10,000 per person, per instance of people who have been discriminated against. And individuals are allowed to bring their own lawsuits. What's going on in Israel? So in Israel, the work is being done by the Ministry of Innovation, Science, and Technology in association with the Department of Ministry and Justice. They have published their just recently, actually this month, their draft policy for public comment. It's going to be modeled after work done in the EU and the USA. In fact, they're working collaboratively. And so this the same idea of being able to understand this and prove it to the regulators, to the auditors, to your big four accounting firms is front and center. Okay. And so what you want, my punchline of this is you want a technology platform that is you can grow with. You don't want to have to replace the stack, the technology platform. You don't want to have to, if you don't have to change the algorithms, the AI, everything you're building. You want a platform that can grow with you. And that's why at Aerospike here we say build once, you can scale forever. We can start small. We work with the largest companies, and it's a great way to go. Just a little bit more, and I'm going to be short on time a little bit, so I'm going to go over some of this quickly. If you're interested, we can talk later. But within Israel, there's a lot of work going on. Some interesting stats. Israel is now #3 in the world for AI solutions. They have 40 times more AI companies per capita than the United States. You can see where the industries where AI is being applied. Israel has identified it as a very core thing. And the really important thing here is it's going to be very heavily looked at and scrutinized to make sure there's no discrimination bias in Israel as well as outside of Israel. And it's a very heavy focus. There's been famous cases around discrimination. Some people might know of Goldman Sachs. They came out with an Apple Card, credit card, co-branded, and they've been accused of discrimination against women. And they are still being pursued by regulators, even in 2022, 3 years after it came out. Not a fun time for Goldman Sachs if people follow this. So let me talk a little about clients here. So I mentioned PayPal before. They've been a longtime client, with us about 7 years. They've never had an unplanned outage. This is an old slide. It says here 280 billion payments. They actually do 1 trillion, and we also cover their Venmo. They had an interesting use case, and I'll show you in the next slide the graph of it. But just conversationally, what their use case was is they had an internal SLA that they wanted to identify whether or not you were a fraudster in 20 milliseconds, just super fast. The entire payment had to be done in under about 80 milliseconds, but the fraudster part had to be in 20. And they were not able to do that with their algorithms about 1% of the time, 1 to 1.5% of the time. And they made a decision because they wanted good customer experience. If they couldn't run the algorithm, it was their fault. They were just going to let it fly. They were going to put the payment through. And they just had enormous fraud. If you know the early days of PayPal, the business almost went out of business several times. MasterCard, Visa were going to throw them off the network. The fraud was out of control. They joined, came to Aerospike. Aerospike became the system. And they were able to reduce that problem down to almost nothing. Almost all the SLAs, the tests were able to go through. I'll show you the next slide, just the quick graph. At the same time, they were able to reduce their server footprint by 15 times. We have a very efficient architecture that allows you to reduce the footprint. And so they saved, great amount of money. They were also, because they were able to run better, faster algorithms, a 30-time reduction in false positives. This is a graph, just real quick, on what this was pre-Aerospike and post-Aerospike. You can see pre-Aerospike, they about 1.5% of the time they couldn't meet the SLA, very squiggly during the day. With Aerospike on the right-hand side, it became flat and very performant and predictable, and a lot less money was at risk. We are coming out with a new product just to share called Aerospike Graph. You'll be able to talk to Ami and Ashra and Zohar about this. We power PayPal's fraud graph, and we're bringing our expertise to this. We're building a system upon Apache Tinkerpop. You'll be able to query it using Gremlin, and it will be an enormously fast graph database. PayPal's obviously a fraud graph based upon the performance of Aerospike. And if you don't know who Tinkerpop is, it's an open source graph solution. It powers Amazon's Neptune, Janus Graph, Microsoft Azure's Cosmos, and Orango. So a very good framework, but the key thing is running on a very, very fast platform that can handle a lot of data. I'll talk here about a top 3 brokerage firm. Actually, it says here Charles Schwab. But basically, we handle all of their front, middle, back office, everything from robo trading to margin lending, risk compliance, real-time reporting, clearing settlement. Just an enormous win for them. They have about 30 million accounts in the system, about 13,000 potential advisors, and just an example of the acceptance of the Aerospike solution with leading firms. Just a few more slides. I'll talk about Barclays Bank. So Barclays in fraud, their issue was a little different. Their issue was they had fraud systems scattered throughout the bank. They had a system for credit cards and different system for core banking and different system for mortgages and auto loans and whatever. They wanted to put together into one common system. So they can share information. They can have a unified data profile, customer data profile, data consistency. Has just been a tremendous win. It allowed them to bring costs down dramatically, to just increase the performance of the system, and really position them for growth and cost-effective growth. They've been very successful in the credit card business, and Aerospike has played a significant part of that. Here's the next one called Early Warning. Owns a company called Zelle. Maybe less familiar to those in Israel. Zelle is the payment system owned by Early Warning is owned by the 7 largest banks in the United States. It's JP Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Capital One. And Zelle is their payment network, payment system, instant payment system. It competes against PayPal. It actually does more transactions than PayPal. And here we beat out HBase, Couchbase, Redis, allow them to dramatically increase their data sets, and let them, importantly, meet their SLA for fraud in a 10 to 20 millisecond window. Just great performance. LexisNexis ThreatMetrics is a leading identity management firm, global. What they do is they allow people to go to your website and let you, as the owner of the website, know if there's someone there who has a high probability of fraud or not. And so they're on 40,000 websites are hitting their system. They process about 130 million transactions. And again, they're processing hundreds of attributes. They were at 100 milliseconds. We got them down to 30 milliseconds. The servers were reduced from 96 to 28, huge cost reduction, millions, and allowed them to scale tremendously. European Central Bank, I'll just share quickly, because we're in another minute or two. We power them. It's the real-time payment system. One more example. Here, we help them do things enormously cost-effectively. I think it's the most important thing. Using Aerospike, they are able to get the cost of a transaction down 0.2 euros. That's like 0.2 cents per payment, and allow them to stay off the association networks where they would have paid 2 to 3%. And they're able to scale across thousands of European banks and just tens and tens and tens of millions of companies. And the last one, and I'm going to be done and hand it over to Ami, is I always like to talk about personalization. I talked about that before with Customer 360. We power a firm called Wayfair, which is a very successful firm in the houseware furniture business that competes against Amazon. They're actually Google Cloud's 3rd largest client. And we power their Customer 360, and it's been a tremendous win. They've been able to increase cart size by 30%, and actually also lowered cart abandonment rates by 30%. So with that, I know we're going to hold questions to the end. I want to thank you for your time and move it over to Ami.
Great. Thank you very much, Stuart. Very, very interesting. Thank you very much for your time. And I would like to quickly share my screen. And as I was saying at the beginning, I will also take over this webinar for a couple of minutes to walk you through some characteristics of what is actually the Aerospike Real-Time Data Platform, what does it mean, the Aerospike Database 6, give you some more technical, high-level details on the technology. So as you've been hearing in the last 30 minutes from Stuart, we power a lot of those right now enterprises, real-time at scale applications. And the 4 main characteristics of Aerospike are the scale, the latency, the uptime, and the cost. And I will say a few words about each one of those. So when we talk about scale, we talk about from any scale, starting with just a couple of gigabytes through terabytes and up to a petabyte scale. And Aerospike was built to provide this extreme low latency. We're talking about sub-millisecond at a very high throughput. We've heard about customers like PayPal earlier in this presentation. It can go even up to millions of transactions per second at this lowest scale, at this lowest latency at any scale, including up to a petabyte scale. So we can actually give predictive performance at any one of those scales with a millisecond latency. In addition to that, we're talking about the 5 nines SLA and globally transaction systems that can assure globally consistent transactional data. As you can see, a few examples of some customers that we have. Some of them are here, Israelis. We are working with customers like Forter and Riskified and Wix. And Stuart has mentioned a couple of those global companies that we are working with, such as Barclays, and we have others such as Adobe and more around cybers and gaming and so on and so forth. One of the more interesting facts is that we don't only provide the unlimited scale at the lowest latency with the leading uptime that I mentioned, we also do that on a significantly lower cost thanks to our unique patented technology that I will describe in a minute. So long story short, you can do that any scale with the high throughput and the low latency with the uptime, and you can do it as long as you continue growing your business and actually paying less and decreasing the energy consumption and the carbon footprint and the server footprint and achieving a much lower TCO versus any other technology that will try to do the same and get the same characteristics as described. How exactly does Aerospike do that? Why is this possible to do that scale and performance and everything that we mentioned, and also do it in a much smaller footprint with less in a much smaller cost? So there are a couple of reasons, and I will walk you through a couple of them. First is our unique patented technology called HMA, the hybrid memory architecture, which basically means that we rely on SSDs, on disks, versus other solutions where they mostly rely on RAM, on memory. That means that we can reduce even up to 80% the amount of servers, the amount of required instances, simply because we don't run on memory and on RAM, which is of course expensive. We run on SSDs. That's part of the unique technology and the architecture, what we call HMA. In addition, we have our intelligent clients, smart clients, which can help us support this high throughput that I was talking about. We also have a built-in technology called XDR for cross data center application, what is allowing us to do this real-time change data notification, CDCs, and move data across different clouds, on-prem to cloud, cloud to on-prem, and of course, different cloud vendors. In addition, the dynamic cluster management, we basically scale up, scale out in a transparent way. So, you know, the DevOps is all about managing your data and not managing your cluster with high resiliency and 5 nines uptime, as I mentioned in the previous slide. And on top of that, you can also make sure we guarantee that the data is strongly consistent across our global distributed data. Aerospike is, of course, a cluster from day one, and we can guarantee that data consistency, which is, of course, very important, especially around the financial services when we talk about, you know, Stuart mentioned things like payments, real-time payments, and you know, when transaction deals with actual money, it's very important, of course, to guarantee that you don't lose any data. Just a really quick look at the architecture. So as I mentioned, Aerospike was built from the ground up to provide real-time data needs, to satisfy those real-time data needs when it comes to latency, when it comes to scale, when it comes to globally distributed data. The database itself, as you can see here, has a couple of different data models that are available, starting from the generic key value, going through document databases. Today, we also support running SQL on top of Aerospike. Stuart mentioned the graph database that is going to be released very soon now, and later next year in 2023, also time series. I've mentioned briefly the fact that the cluster is being managed automatically, transparently, with data distribution and smart cluster management and change notifications. And when it comes to the actual storage engine, so I mentioned briefly the fact that we run on disks, on SSDs, with hybrid memory architecture. We also have options to run in memory, just like other caching solutions, if you insist on doing that, or all on flash disk, all on SSDs, or also using a hardware called persistent memory. In addition to that, we of course have, like I mentioned, the smart clients, and we support a large variety of clients. We also have JSON API and REST API, and as I mentioned, SQL. In many cases, what we see is customers using the Aerospike database, the Aerospike Real-time Data Platform, or what is called system of engagement or edge system, where we get real-time data that is streaming from desktops, from mobile, from social, from IoTs, sensors, systems, and so on and so forth. Of course, supporting all the main streaming related technologies like Kafka and Pulsar and the rest. And at the same time, we also see many customers using Aerospike also for their core system of records, where they store, sometimes it's larger sets of data, which also enables them to run AI and ML on top of that data, and it's powered by the same engine, the same real-time data platform, the same database on different clusters, and also using our technology, as I mentioned before, the XDR, the cross data center application, to move the data between these clusters. And again, supporting also SQL access, things like Trino, Presto, Spark, and other technologies that can allow you to use the data that is stored on Aerospike. I didn't mention it, but I do want to spend a few seconds and say that we are a cloud agnostic technology, so we don't really care if you use Aerospike technology on any cloud provider. Of course, we support the main clouds, GCP, AWS, Azure, as well as other clouds, and also on-prem. We have customers using both on-prem and cloud, and any cloud, and also, of course, the Kubernetes operator. Stuart mentioned a couple of examples here. There's a slide with some more examples. Some are local to Israel, to our market here, the local industry, things like Wix and Cybereason and Double Verify and Iron Source and others like WalkMe, and of course some global examples. We have a large variety of use cases, from user profile stores to system of engagement to customer 360 and fraud, of course, as Stuart has mentioned. And one of the things that we see over and over again, thanks to the fact that we have our unique patented technology, as I mentioned, is the fact that we can provide you a dramatic reduction in both the complexity of managing those clusters and managing the gigabytes, terabytes, or petabytes of data that you have, and also, of course, in terms of cost. When you reduce the amount of servers, like we did, for example, for Politica, from 200 servers to only 30 servers, while at the same time you triple the amounts of reads, writes on the database, you're going from 200,000 per second to 600,000 per second in 30 servers versus 200. Of course, there's a significant reduction in both complexity and in cost, as you can see here on this slide. That's basically what I wanted to go over very briefly. We have a couple of other slides here. We're going to also share the presentation, so you can take a look at those slides later on. You are welcome to take a look online, check our website and see what others are saying, Deloitte, Forrester, and others, and also read on our website some benchmarks and the Forrester report and what exactly is that Aerospike difference. We have some white papers that you can further read about the technology itself. Of course, there are some blogs, developer blogs. We have some summits that we did with customer presentations that you can take a look at and listen to customer presentation, like the PayPal, for example, that Stuart has mentioned before. We also have the local Israeli Aerospike user group, the meetup page, where you can sign up and attend our meetups. And if you are a developer and you want to try out Aerospike technology and see what exactly it means to use the Aerospike database, so you can go online to our developer hub. We have a core sandbox there that you can use, and you can actually try it out and see yourself how exactly it works. This is where I finish my 10 minutes. That actually took me 11, I believe. I stopped the sharing we are still here. Stuart is here with me. And I think I saw a question on one of the channels here that I got. Stuart, I believe this one is for you. So Stuart, given all those different regulations in different countries, what is the best way to make sure that we are compliant in each country?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a great question, and it's a real issue for companies. It's been around for a while with data privacy, as an example, and now with the explainable AI, the idea of being able to prove your AI systems don't discriminate. I'll give you a real simple example of what's happening. So let's say you operate in Israel, Europe, the United States, and the UK. The UK, just so you know, has different laws now for GDPR, and they're going to have different laws for discrimination because they're the UK. They've split off. The penalties, like I said, can be very large, right? For GDPR data privacy, it's 4% of global revenues. Anyway, to cut to the chase, what the better companies are doing, and it's a reason another reason companies choose Aerospike, is you want to be able to process the data locally to meet local regulations, but still be able to use the data holistically across the entire enterprise. And so Aerospike, and then Ami can probably talk in more detail, you can actually set up different isolated, siloed Aerospike instances. For instance, in Israel, EU, UK, USA, run just that local data against the compliance algorithms to make sure it meets regs, and then still use it holistically for everything else you need. I mean, you may be able to talk about that a little more for using XDR and how we can set up different
clusters. XDR is definitely one of the, I would say, more common features that we see many customers are leveraging. And sometimes it's for redundancy purposes, for DR purposes, for creating a cluster and a kind of like a warm, backup cluster that you can use. Sometimes it's for reporting reasons, that you have your main production cluster, another cluster that you keep running queries for reportings, connecting it to things like Aerospike SQL, for example, that I mentioned earlier. And of course, the cases where you have multiple geographies and multiple clusters, and you need to sync the data across these different clusters across the different countries. So yes, of course, it's one of the, I think, one of the most common out of the box, I would say, features that our customers definitely benefit and like using. There was another question that was here, and maybe I need to repeat that. It also can be related to the geography and the clusters. So can Aerospike work on a cloud or on-premise, on both? The answer is Aerospike can work on basically any hardware as long as we basically require SSDs, because the magic, I would say, is based on the fact that we can run our technology on SSDs, on any kind of SSD. We don't have our own SSD that we provide. We basically take whatever you got or whatever the cloud provider will give us. So again, many customers of us use AWS with or without another cloud vendor. We have customers moving data with XDR, like we said, between clouds, between AWS and GCP, and we have that customers using our solution on AWS and AWS. And if also, you saw the examples of Playtika, for example, where they have their own clusters running on premise, and of course, as I mentioned before, also with using Kubernetes, and we have the Aerospike Kubernetes operator that we released a couple of months ago, and we already have customers leveraging that on their environment. So these are all possible implementations. I would also add that we have what we call our Aerospike Cloud Service. It's a managed service where we basically manage your clusters in your cloud environment. So today supported on AWS and GCP, and by the end of the year supported as well on Microsoft Azure. Our team can manage the clusters for you in a fully managed service with SLA and everything else. And it's a global team, 24/7, follow the sun, of course. We do have customers that they either manage their clusters manually by themselves, or they use that service, the Aerospike cloud service, where we manage the clusters for them. Database as a service is something that we are actually announcing now in this time of year, and that is also becoming available in the next couple of weeks. So that's another option that is, stay tuned, and that is going to follow this this webinar very soon now.
Could I add one thing to that? To what you said?
Go ahead, please.
Just within financial services. So this idea of working in a hybrid environment is very common. People work on AWS and Azure, or they'll have on-prem. What I just wanted to share is that from regulatory reasons in financial services, it's almost a requirement. You have to be able to prove that your system is going to be resilient and stable, and so almost everybody is working in exactly that hybrid environment, and it's a big reason. Also, I find people are choosing to go with Aerospike.
Great. Very, very, very important. Very good to know. Thank you for adding that. So what is the best approach to start with Aerospike? How do you work with your customers? Stuart, do you want to start this, and maybe I'll chime in?
Sure. Just at a high level, from sort of a business level, and I've been on the other side of the table too. One of the things that I've been with Aerospike about 2.5 years, and it took me a little while to get my head around this. That how can Aerospike, be this scalable, very performant system, and not be expensive? It sounds expensive, because the architecture, and Ami showed a lot of examples. We're able to do it very cost effectively, and the other part that's not intuitive is I showed a lot of examples of big companies, the PayPal's. Most of our customers, many of them, started very small. They started on 2 or 3 applications. So as an example, Charles Schwab, which is the largest brokerage firm, online brokerage firm in the United States, started with 2 or 3 applications, very small and sort of risk compliance, account management type things. And over time, it expanded across the enterprise. And it's a very common way to prove the value. To do it, we do proof of value things with customers, which we can spin up pretty quickly. But the key thing, I'm going to move it over to Ami to talk about the technical side of how we start. But the takeaway I want from you is we can start small with your enterprise. We always find good wins. We won't do it with you unless it's a win for both of us, and then expand throughout your enterprise. And so maybe Ami, you can take it from there.
Yeah, thanks a lot for saying that, because I was just about to say that, and I think it sounds much more, it sounds much better, when you say that, and then I just basically, emphasize, because that's exactly the way we work. What you said, Stuart, is exactly the way we do business. If we sit down with you, Mr. Customer, and usually, we do these kind of architecture sessions alongside, with your teams and our team, and Zohar, as our senior solution architect, is also here with us on this conversation. We identify the use case. We can do some kind of sizing, potential sizing, and configuration sessions. If the use case is not right, if the use case is not appropriate, we will not take the business. We will basically say, hey, Mr. Customer, sorry, that's not the right use case. You will not really benefit from using our technology. And that's a very important thing to say. We like to take those customers hand in hand, like you said, Stuart, start small with a single use case, maybe 2 use cases, maybe a couple of them. And when we identify the right use cases, we migrate them and we bring them on board. And I've showed, in my 10 slides, I've showed a couple of examples. Maybe all those customers end-to-end started really small, and in the last 4, 5, 6 years that we've done business with them, have grown significantly and became, Aerospike became the go-to database solution for the real-time need across their business, whether it's gaming or ad tech or financial services or e-commerce or user profile stores or whatever. And again, if the use case is not a good fit for us, we will say, excuse me, that's not a good fit. I also want to add in a couple of more seconds that specifically here in Israel, as we have a lot of startups and we are working very close with the startup community, we have what we call the Aerospike for Startups program, which is a unique program for the startups in Israel. So we will be more than happy to have a quick meeting with you guys if you are interested, if you want to hear more about this program, what exactly are the benefits and what exactly does this mean to you as a startup, and also check if you are eligible, if you can get accepted to that unique program. We have like a quick, simple form, couple of questions, and then we can do a quick meeting and discuss your use case and discuss your business. And if it's a good fit, then we will be more than happy to add you to that Aerospike for Startups program that we have here running in Israel. So that's another thing to consider. Okay, I think that we are almost out of time. We have like a minute. So let's just say thank you very much. Stuart, anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up and finish this?
I mean, there's a lot more I could share. I mean, just real quickly, thank you for inviting me here. It's been wonderful, getting to spend time with you and Zohar and Ashrat and the people on this webinar. What I encourage people to do is to reach out. There's a lot more information. We have a lot of knowledge on things that we can share. And again, we're very easy to work with. One of the things we hear all the time is that it's easy to do POCs with us. We're easy to work with. We have great references from leading companies, and I'll just throw it back to you. But thanks again for inviting me.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Stuart. So again, like Stuart said, we invite you to take a look at our website. We have lots of knowledge and use cases and examples and customers references and customer videos as well that you can take a look. We will share the slides with some links to the website, so you can take a look at the resources that we have there, the customer presentations that are out there. And also, of course, as I said, the recording of this webinar, we're going to put it on our YouTube channel and also on our Meetup webpage under the meetup.com platform. So thank you very much, everyone, for spending this last hour with us. I hope you enjoyed it, and all the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.